The nations have gathered. COP28 is here. Should you even care? Find out today on The Prophetic Eye. I don't know if you heard, but there's some big news coming out of the Vatican. Are you ready? The Pope had the flu. This is a big deal, and I'm going to tell you why in just a moment. But before I do, there's some other important matters that we need to tend to. I want to start today by taking a trip back in time. It was a simpler time. Year was 2009. I had a few less years on me. My son wasn't born yet, so he wasn't there to stress me out. So I had a lot more hair, and I only had pepper here. No salt at all. Thanks a lot, son. Anyway, this is me preaching in 2009, and this was actually episode 4 of the original Prophetic Eye series. It was posted on December 4th, 2009, almost exactly 14 years ago to the day. And the episode was called, How's the Weather? It was that year that I saw something emerging. The video's a little grainy and a little less polished, but let's take a look anyway. And so we're seeing changes in the weather. We're seeing more frequent hurricanes, we're seeing more frequent tornadoes, we're seeing the world convulsing. And so the response of the world has been that something's going on. There's global warming. The climate's changing. But what we're going to see is that this is going in a direction that I did not even consider. And everything is lining up to the fulfillment of Revelation 13.
Well, you thought there were only 7 deadly sins to worry about, but now there are more to add to the list.
Yes, the Catholic Church has added 7 more to the list.
Paper or plastic? You could be committing a sin if you choose plastic. A new list of what might be considered modern-day sins has been published in a Vatican newspaper, adding to the original 7 deadly sins of lust, gluttony, envy, greed, sloth, wrath, and pride. The additional sins include polluting our environment and are considerably more global in nature and, according to the Vatican, aimed at those who might undermine society in far-reaching ways.
And so this is nothing new. This is an excerpt from something that Pope John Paul II spoke about in 1990. And we're going to see that the world is mirroring everything that the papacy has to say. It was all there. The climate change movement, the nations coming together to save the planet, and the previous pope leading the charge. It seems like the more things change, the more they stay the same. But the fact of the matter is that here we are 14 years later, and they're still having those climate meetings. And there are 2 trains of thought right now when it comes to prophecy and the climate change movement. The first train of thought is that the climate change movement and its relation to the fulfillment of Revelation 13 and 17 is much ado about nothing, a complete waste of time. And the other train of thought is that the climate change movement is much ado about everything, and that it's the radical, ungodly globalists that are going to lead out in passing laws requiring people to worship on Sunday. Well, the answer is somewhere in the middle. And if you have the prophetic eye, then you will understand why the climate change movement is not much ado about nothing. And it's not much ado about everything. In actuality, it's much ado about something. And if you hang in there with me today, then you're going to find out why. And remember, you're also going to find out why the Pope's flu is so important. We need to start out by understanding the prophetic framework laid out in Revelation 13. Generally speaking, when I mention the prophetic eye, I'm talking about the principles that we laid out in our video, Revelation 13 in 13 minutes. You should check that one out if you haven't already. In that video, we lay out the 6 principles that will give you the lens to understand everything that's happening in the world, or as I call them, SOS, the 6 obstacles to Sunday. These 6 things can help us understand what to look for as we see what's happening in the world. And there's 2 of these 6 things that I want to focus on today. Number 1, Revelation 13 clearly points to the fact that the Christian world will take the lead in removing liberty of conscience and passing a Sunday law. And number 2, there will be worldwide cooperation in order to bring this about. And how do we know this? Just take a look at the words. I mean, really take a look at the words for yourself. It talks about a beast or a nation that represents a lamb representing Jesus, the Lamb of God. So obviously, this is a Christian movement. There will be miracles associated with this movement. So clearly, this is religious in nature. In addition to this, we are told that everybody, small, great, rich, poor, free, bond, will be required to receive the mark. That means worldwide cooperation. And in order to have worldwide cooperation, the entire world has to be on board. And this is what it means in Revelation 17, when it says that these have one mind, and that they will give their power and strength to the beast. And we know that this beast is the papacy. And this is what we need to understand about the climate change movement. It's not nothing, it's not everything, but it is something. It's something that's pulling the world together to be of one mind. And the point is that the papacy is at the forefront of this, and they have been for a very long time. I want you to take a look at this statement from the Great Controversy. It says, "The Roman Church is far-reaching in her plans and modes of operation. She is employing every device to extend her influence and increase her power in preparation for a fierce and determined conflict, to regain control of the world, to reestablish persecution, and to undo all that Protestantism has done. Catholicism is gaining ground upon every side." I hope you caught that. Far-reaching, plans, modes of operation, every device to extend influence, to increase power. Catholicism is gaining ground on every side. I don't know. Is it just me, or is this implying that we should pay attention to the work that the papacy is doing in front of the scenes and behind the scenes? But we should do this while keeping in mind that Protestant America will take the lead to cause the world to create a union of church and state. In other words, keep your prophetic eyes on both entities. Be mindful of the movements of the papacy. Pay attention to the movements of Christian nationalism, and keep your eyes on the coming together of the nations. And this includes, but is not limited to, keeping your eye on the climate change movement, which now brings me to the Pope's flu. If you didn't hear, the Pope was sick, and it was all over the news. And it made the news because he was supposed to go to the COP28 meetings that just started. In this article from The Guardian entitled, "Pope Francis Still Unwell After Canceling Trip to COP28, it says, Pope Francis said that he is still not well and entrusted one of his aides to read a prepared speech in his place at the weekly general audience in the Vatican on Wednesday. If you don't know, the COP28 meetings are a continuation of plans and modes of operation that have been going on for around 30 years. These meetings have played a major role in fostering a common goal for the nations of the earth to come together to try to save the planet. We covered these modes of operation in our docuseries last year on COP27, and I highly recommend that you take a look at that series to get up to speed, if you haven't done so already. And I promise you that it will help you to get the prophetic eye very quickly. Anyway, from Pope John Paul II to Pope Benedict to Pope Francis, for some reason, the papacy has seen a need to insert themselves into, and in some cases lead out in this movement for decades. And in this same article from The Guardian, we can get a glimpse into why that is. It says, the 86-year-old who has made protecting the environment a cornerstone of his 10-year papacy had planned to become the first pontiff to attend the annual event since they began in 1995. That's right. This was going to be the first time that a pontiff was going to attend this climate change summit, and it was hindered by the flu. Maybe this is one of the ways that God continues to hold the winds. But back to the article. The article also highlighted that this has been a cornerstone of Pope Francis's 10-year papacy, and I didn't say that, The Guardian did. So, why is this so important to him? Let's read on. With Francis's withdrawal from COP28, which begins on Thursday, the conference will lose a high-profile advocate of the environment, a moral authority on the global stage whose words, some believe, could nudge governments to take concrete action. And there it is, more and more, the climate change movement being recognized as a moral issue. And as the article stated, the Pope is being recognized as the, quote, moral authority to nudge the governments to take action. Or in other words, they are using far-reaching plans, modes of operation, and every device to extend their influence. The groundwork for this has been laid for years. By making this a moral issue, the papacy has positioned themselves to be that moral leader. This is why in Pope Benedict's encyclical letter, he stated that there was an urgent need of a true world political authority. He stated that the concept of the family of nations needs to acquire real teeth. This is what you need to understand. In the world that we live in, there are Jews, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, atheists, Buddhists. The list goes on, and the papacy will work in whatever capacity they can to bring all these people together under their moral authority in an attempt to undo all that Protestantism has done. And this influence is paying off, and I want you to see it by taking a look at this other first that's happening at COP28 right now, as it relates to the religious community coming together and the moral implications of the climate change movement. In this article from the United Nations Environment Program website, it talks about the importance of faith-based engagement at COP28. It says, faith-based organizations and religious leaders are an important presence at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference of Parties, demonstrating that religious and spiritual communities are essential to fight against climate change and to achieve the sustainability development Development Goals and the goals of the Paris Agreement. Here's another one from the National Catholic Reporter, entitled COP28 to have first ever faith pavilion at the UN Climate Summit. It says, Pope Francis is set to speak at the inauguration of the first ever faith pavilion during the upcoming 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference in the United Arab Emirates, as political leaders from across the globe gather from November 30th to December 12th to assess how well they are addressing climate change. Religious officials, including Francis, who was both a head of state and the leader of the worldwide Catholic Church, will have a new place of prominence. Did you catch it? He's a prominent leader of the church, and he's also a prominent leader of the state. Now, of course, we know he didn't go because he had the flu. But look at that. Religious officials have a new place of prominence, and they established a faith pavilion there. It seems to me that the religious are taking the climate change baton, and they're getting ready to run with it. When we add this to the reality laid out in Matthew 24 and Luke 21 that talks about the increasing natural disasters as we get closer and closer to the second coming of Christ, what we have here is a recipe for worldwide influence that will clearly play a major role in end-time prophecy. The prophet John foresaw the worldwide issues at the end of time. He saw the calls for the so-called family of nations to be formed, and he was given messages by Jesus himself to counteract this work. This is why you see it over and over again in the book of Revelation. Every kindred, tongue, people, and nation. Those terms are found in Revelation 5, 7, 10, 11, 13, 14, 17, 18. Are you seeing a pattern here? I think God is trying to tell us something. He's trying to tell us that there is a message that needs to get to all the races, all the religions, all the people he has died for. And it's a message that will counteract the plans and modes of operation of the papacy. As I mentioned in a recent episode of The Prophetic Eye covering Laudate Deum, the current pope has continued the calls for action on climate. And there's a reason for this, and it's very simple. The wound that was received in Revelation 13 was a loss of political and religious authority and influence. And the healing of the wound, also mentioned in Revelation 13 verse 3, will be a regaining of political and religious authority. When you see articles showing up saying that the Pope is a moral authority on the world stage as it relates to climate, what do you think is going to happen when things really break loose in nature? Well, we're told exactly what's going to happen. The great deceiver will persuade men that those who serve God are causing these evils. It will be declared that men are offending God by the violation of the Sunday Sabbath, that this sin has brought calamities which will not cease until Sunday observance shall be strictly enforced. And I can assure you that when this happens, the so-called moral authority will be very much involved. The transition is already taking place. The calls are already being made that we need to have days off in order to help the planet heal. Now, obviously, it hasn't fully taken on a religious fervor yet, but as natural disasters increase, it most certainly eventually will. It's been 14 years since episode 4 of the original Prophetic Eye series, and I'm even more convinced today of the role that the signs in nature are going to play in the fulfillment of Revelation 13 and 17. What started out as a non-religious movement is now being framed as a moral issue with a moral authority at the head. People of all faiths and non-faiths, every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, with all of their differences, will be able to find a commonality in the climate change movement, in saving the planet, in stopping the natural disasters. And this will indeed play a role in the eventual calls to return to God that will come from the Christian world. God is continuing to hold the winds to give us an opportunity to know him for ourselves before all the winds are let loose. Now, I don't know if the Pope's flu is an example of those winds being held, but this I do know. Now is the time to make our calling and election sure, and to reach every kindred, nation, tongue, and people before they are influenced to go along with the ever-increasing trend. And I pray that you will partner with us to do just that. So if you've been blessed or enlightened by this video, or what we like to call digital tracts, then I want to invite you to help us share these digital tracts by sharing, liking, and commenting, as it helps us reach a wider audience. And as we close, we'll do so by answering 2 questions. Number 1, is the climate change movement nothing? No, it's not nothing. Number 2, is the climate change movement everything? No, it's not everything. But I can certainly say this, that the climate change movement, it sure is something. God bless, and please remember to keep the prophetic eye.